Hello, 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 and welcome to today's episode of Her Version. Our goal with this show and company is to introduce you to real people and the challenges they have faced in their lives in order to share their experiences and their ideas with you. We believe that storytelling is an amazing way to aspire and uplift the human spirit from any darkness you might be experiencing in your life. I am your host, Sabrina Victoria. If you are new to this podcast, make sure you follow, like, subscribe, and share. Let's jump right in. Hello, and I want to thank you, those of you that are listening now live and those of you that are listening on the replay. We appreciate the audience here, that we are slowly growing on the Her Version podcast. If you are listening to this podcast and you do feel as if this will resonate with somebody that you know, please share. We appreciate the shares. The Her Version platform is built on storytelling, as you know, and the understanding that many times our greatest learning experiences come from listening to other people's stories. Today, I am speaking with an amazing woman named, oh my gosh, I forgot to ask how to pronounce your name. Is it Jothi or Jothi?
Jothi Dugar.
Jothi Dugar. Jothi is here today to talk about female traditions, the culture of marriage, and how she has healed from a lifetime of limiting belief systems that were handed down from generations of Indian origin. Jothi is an author and an expert in complete lifestyle changes. She is here to inspire us to break free from any lifelong barriers that are holding us back from our ultimate joy and happiness. Welcome.
Thank you so much. I'm so thrilled to be here today, and I hope this topic really resonates with many of you out there, I know.
Yes. Listen, I know that you are super busy and you've got a ton of things on your plate between mom and woman and career and job and all of those things that you have going on in your world. So I so appreciate you taking some time out of your day to sit with us, chat. And I'm actually really excited about this podcast because of the culture, the culture differences. There are similarities and then there are things that are just completely different. So I'm hoping that we can kind of dive into some of those things and you can kind of enlighten us on, things that Americans or people that aren't in that culture have no idea, no clue about. So I'm excited.
Yes, I'd be happy to.
Yes. So how's your week been?
It's been challenging, but I did brand myself as the chaos guru. So if anyone can ride the waves of chaos, it has to be me, right?
100%. It's funny. My fiance was actually just kind of telling me that the other day because I broke my leg back in October 2020. I snapped my leg in half, my right leg. And I just went in for surgery last Friday, went back under, they slit my leg back open and took out all the hardware. So I'm like limping around again in a ton of pain and doing the normal, like complaining. And my fiance was like, well, this is a great story to tell.
Don't you love it when they, turn it back on you? Aren't you supposed to be the expert? Like, yes.
And
I will read my own book and I will follow my own guidance.
Oh, that's great. I absolutely love it. We're always getting tested, people. We're always getting tested. And that's what I love about this platform is being able to come on here and share our stories and the things that we've learned from the things that we've gone through. So listen, I would love for you to kind of back up a little bit and share a little bit about who you are, your culture and some of the traditions that you grew up with.
Sure. So, so I'm Jothi Dugar. I was born as a South Indian person, but I came to the U.S. when I was 1. So my parents came, they brought me over when I was 1. So I was pretty much raised here in the U.S. as a as a westernized Indian young lady or young girl. And the major influence in my life has been that my parents came here when I was one. So they also came with all the traditional beliefs and values and customs and traditions and conforming to all of those society systems from India back 30 years ago. And they brought all that with them here in the US, and they kind of never evolved or grew themselves past that, even though India is way past that now.
Wow.
And
Okay.
America has never really been like that. So growing up in a very traditional restrictive family, and also there was a lot of uh abuse as well, which we'll get into later on. But in the Indian culture, it's not considered abuse. It's just considered disciplining, or this is, well, hey, we're raising you to be a good child that's
Yeah.
going to conform to society pressure and cultural pressure and parental pressure, so that you can then conform to your husband. So that's kind of the mentality there that I grew up in. And when I used to do podcasts before, I used to say, hey, I became successful, and I broke the glass ceiling in pretty much everything that I've done in spite of my parents. I'm going to rephrase that moving forward, just based on all the therapy and healing that I've gone through, and say, well, part of it was in spite of them, but part of it was because of them. And the part of it that was because of them was because if I wasn't subjected to all of these challenges, I would say, then I wouldn't have really felt the need to kind of break out of my own cocoon and
Yeah.
really become that butterfly and realize that, hey, I need to figure out who I am outside of all of this. And be able to like your podcast, be able to speak my own truth, and be okay with it, even if it's going to ruffle feathers, and even if people are going to be in denial. I'm sure when you talk to when you talk to people that have been abused, and then you talk to the people that are the abusers, they're like, what are you talking about? Like,
Yep.
you've never been abused. You had
Yep.
a great relationship. And I struggled a lot with that. So I know we'll get into more of the details, but I feel like I was kind of brought here. I was actually brought to my parents for a reason. It's to kind of break those chains, and use the experiences that I had as a child, but also kind of become my own person, and have the strength to do that.
Exactly, exactly. And I appreciate the kind of, I don't want to say struggle, but I guess struggle that you're kind of having, even articulating what that is or what that means or what that looks like, because it is kind of strange saying, you know, thank you for this happening to me. Because it isn't nice, it isn't good, it isn't loving, and it does suck. But being able to kind of look back and from a healing point of view and say thank you is strange. It's strange to say, and it's strange even for people who aren't healed to hear that. Like, what does that even mean? How can you even say that? So I totally understand, the I guess I don't want to say frustration. I don't even know what word I'm looking for, but still trying to articulate what that means for us. So I get that. Can you talk to us about some of the strict mindsets that you grew up with, and how you now view a lot of what was taught or expected of you, as
Yeah.
abusive?
One aspect was I was the only child. So,
I didn't know that.
that didn't really help. Yeah, so
Wow.
there's a lot of pressure, spotlights on you, everything's your fault. It rains today. Oh, it's your fault. There's bad weather. I'm like, okay.
No
So,
kidding.
um, so some of it was from an Indian culture standpoint, where, especially South Indians, like they're known to be intellectual. There's a huge difference between or at least there was, between like North Indians, South Indians. Like North Indians are more the business oriented folks, usually, Dunkin' Donuts owners, and you know, uh, the gas station, 7-Elevens. So they kind of go more into like business.
Okay.
South Indians are kind of more into like being teachers, like professors, philosophers, doctors, lawyers. Like they're very focused on, you have to get straight A's. You have to, like that's like your priority is to get, phenomenal grades, and then get in, be the valedictorian in, colleges,
Okay.
while doing all of these other things that colleges expected you to do, like activities and being the leader and all of these things. So I had a lot of that. I mean, I probably learned every sport there was.
Wow.
Like dance, music, violin, ice skating, gymnastics, pretty much everything. So and I didn't mind that so much because I was, it was actually time away from home, which is where I didn't want to be.
Good point.
So like, great, I could do all these activities, but you still had to kind of maintain that, 4.0 GPA, and you can only keep that up for so long because you're not getting any sleep.
Yeah.
Especially if you're actually good at the activities. I mean, if you're really bad at them, then but it's kind of like I was actually good at these things, so you kept going up like the next levels, so which means more time. Um, so I had a lot of that going on, and I used to be super scared of coming home with like a B in my report card.
Wow.
I mean, I would really, I would do anything. Like I would go to the teacher and beg and plead, like, can I do something? Can I retake the exam? Can I take another exam? Can I do more homework? And they're like, you got a B. That's great. I'm like, no, you don't understand.
Wow.
And yeah, because that just means it's more trauma at home from, whatever mood my mom was going to be in. I did, like, okay, let's just take the path of least resistance. So I am going to try my best to get straight A's and keep up with all of these other things.
Wow.
So part of it was the intellectual pressure. A lot of it was also culture and society pressure, where you had to be the subdued, quiet girl that doesn't talk back to her parents, that doesn't have a voice, that doesn't really look out for herself. She just kind of blindly follows whatever her parents say. Respect the elders regardless of their own behavior.
Yep.
It's kind of like they can say or do or act however they want, but you are a child and you're a girl, so therefore you must conform. And even if their actions don't match their words, it doesn't matter, right? Like
Yep.
like they said something, you better do it. And they were also very religious, so it actually turned me against religion right from when I was
Wow.
a child. Not that I didn't believe, I was born as a Hindu, and not that I don't believe in Hinduism, but I didn't feel like, well, you guys are so religious and yet you're acting this way, so therefore your connection to religion must not really be working.
Absolutely.
And how can you go to the temple, but the entire way back and forth, you're cursing, you're, being abusive, like verbally and physically, and really, like, that's like, I just didn't get it. So I
Yeah.
actually became a lot more spiritual, even as a child. Like, I did believe that there was a higher power, whether it's God or universe, or I don't even know what to call it, because I knew that I had to get out of the situation, and I will one day.
Wow. Wait, how old were you when you started kind of already like understanding this?
I think it was maybe like, when I think about it, I think it was less than 10.
Wow.
So probably like around like fifth grade or so was when I'm like, okay, I don't want to die in the hands of my mom. I love who I am or who I want to be. And I always had like that vision of what I wanted in life. So I never really, people ask me like, oh, did you have any suicidal thoughts? I'm like, honestly, that's the one thing that I don't think ever in my life I thought about doing. Because I was like, why
Wow.
should I harm myself because of somebody else's issues.
Good.
And it took me a while to understand, like, as I went to friends' houses and I saw their parents and their moms, I realized, like, wow, this is not normal.
Yes.
There's something wrong with my situation over here and my parents. I mean, my dad was trying to help, but he was also being abused. So, he tried the best he could, but, long story short, like, they came to this country, and I don't think he wanted to lose me to the court system or to my mom, because he knows how, US is kind of, they'll mostly side with the mom, and she was very good at kind of changing her personality around depending on the situation. So it'd be very hard to prove. So so I had to kind of do the best I could to kind of stick under the radar as much as I could, not call attention to myself. But when he talked about people that haven't healed, I felt like, as I moved past my childhood, and then I kind of, got my own freedom. But then I got married, and now I'm getting my freedom from that. I feel like, wow, like, I really haven't healed fully. And I feel like healing is like a process that you may heal up to a certain point, and you feel like, okay, I'm good. Like, these things don't affect me anymore. But then something else hits you, or, there's a trigger, and then you realize, like, oh, wow, like, okay, I really haven't healed fully. So then I think what I found is, like, you got to take that next level up and be like, okay, you got to heal at other levels.
Yes, absolutely. And I love that you're talking so openly about the age in which you started to kind of comprehend this, because I think a lot of times parents don't realize how young children are, like, and they're actually smart, and they actually have self-awareness. And we kind of view our children as, like, how much do you really remember from when you were a child? Not really that much, but we remember how we felt. We might not remember all of that, the ice cream, extravaganzas, or all the camping trips in great detail, but we remember how we felt.
And that's a great point. I think I heard someone saying that once, where they said, people might never remember exactly what you said or what you did, but they remember how you made them feel.
Yeah.
And that's going to either bridge the connection, or it's going to break you apart. Because if you're constantly making the other person feel bad, or feel abused, or just feel neglected, then, they're not really going to have that connection with you.
Exactly.
But you could be doing nothing and just kind of help that other person to feel good about themselves, and that's what they're going to remember. Oh, this person always makes me feel good about myself.
Exactly. And you being able to, and I can totally relate to that, you being able to go to other friends' houses and see the difference.
Yeah, and they were thinking I was kidding. I'm like, oh my gosh, like, like, my mom said I have to be home by 7, and it's now 7:05. Like, I'm too scared to go home. They're like, you're like 5 minutes late. Like, what's the big deal? I'm like, no, you don't understand.
Wow.
And they're like, what? So, and they're like, well, what is she gonna do? I'm like,
It's hard to explain even.
Yeah, and they thought I was kidding. They're like, well, she's not gonna do that. I'm like, it's happened before, and I can guarantee it's gonna happen again. And
wow.
They're like, wow. So, and I know as a child being raised in this country, people have asked me, like, well, why didn't you call CPS? What did you tell a teacher? I'm like, yes, but what you don't understand is, they're not just going to come and remove you and put you in a system. And who's to say, like, a system is going to be any better?
Yeah,
right?
Exactly.
So they're going to come and do a whole lot of interviews. And if a person is capable of changing their personality around, depending on the situation, they're really never going to get to, like, the bottom, the root. And then especially if you have another parent who's kind of, too scared.
Enabling it.
Right, who's like enabling it, then it just becomes like, oh, this kid is just, she's just trying to cause trouble, or she, wants attention or something like that. And then you go back to the same situation, and it gets a lot worse, because now it's like,
now they're pissed.
yeah, so I'm like, yeah, that was not a good choice.
Wow.
Like, never do that again.
Yeah, and that's a real thing. That's a real thing that that children know, are scared of, fearful of, and definitely a flaw, a flaw in the system as far as even just therapy,
Yeah,
you
yeah.
know.
And I think back then, um, it takes a lot of self actualization to realize you have an issue and get, and seek help
Yeah,
for yourself.
yeah,
It's very different when everyone else is telling you you have an issue and you feel like, oh, there's nothing wrong with me. So you can't really get that person into therapy.
yeah,
And even if they go, they're just going to lie, or they're just going to sit there staring at the wall and like, I don't have anything to talk about. um,
exactly.
so, but it helped me as a child to understand, okay, this is not normal. She has issues. I know what I want to do in life. I mean, one, get out of here.
Yes, yes.
So I never really, had like, I mean, I could say maybe I was depressed for a while, but then I kind of, I always, I was kind of forced to kind of process my feelings very quickly and get out of like a funky state because, first of all, I had a busy life. I had to do good in school. I had all of these activities, and I really relied heavily on the support of good friends, and I still do. And I really cherished and valued my friendships, and they were my family.
Yeah.
And that's really what kept me going. And it's still what's keeping me going. Like, I mean, I'm actually closer to, I think, some of my really good friends than I am with, you know, any of my family members. I mean,
Yeah.
other than my kids.
Yeah.
So I think it's good to, establish that, if anyone is going through a challenging situation, especially if you can't really rely on immediate family, look at who your true friends are, and and see if you can seek some support through them.
Exactly. Now it seems that you kind of came to, as you're calling it, self-realization fairly young. However, what were your views, as a younger female, as far as female traditions, and how do they kind of differ from, where you are now? Are there any differences, or did you kind of realize that that wasn't a thing for you fairly young? Like,
Um, I
like were
think
there were there traditions that you were kind of holding on to in through college and
um, for me, I think everything that my parents try to force me to do, whether it's traditions or religion or values or even food, I associated all of that with my parents, and then I kind of grew a real sense of kind of hatred towards that.
wow.
Maybe I wouldn't call it hatred because it's a strong word. I would just I would maybe just say I was strongly opposed to any of that. Like South Indian food right now, I'm like, no, I hate South Indian food.
Wow.
Like wearing like traditional South Indian clothes, I'm like, oh no, I'm not gonna wear that. So and they thought, and to them it was kind of like, oh, you keep like rebelling against like everything that we stand for. I'm like, well, I wouldn't call it rebelling, but I'm like, well, I was forced to do these things,
Mhm.
and I conformed for so long, and now I'm not going to conform anymore. Like if I feel like doing it one day, I will do that, but I'm not going to be forced to, because it became kind of my parents using religion as a, oh, our religion says you must do this and you must do that. I'm like, really? I'm like, I don't think. Show me the book, and I was always kind of I became an electrical engineer through college, but I always had that kind of engineering mind. I'm like, really? Show me the book that says that. Like, why do we have to do it this way? Why do you have
Yeah.
to do that? And they're like, oh, just do it. I'm like, and I was never that type of person that I really resonated with. Like, you should do it because I told you to do it.
Yeah.
Because I think when you lose respect for your parent as a child because they're not acting in a respectful manner, everything that they tell you to do suddenly becomes a, oh, well, why should I do that? Because they obviously don't have it together. So why should I follow anything that you say? And you'll be surprised that argument still exists today.
No
You know, it's
kidding.
like, Jothi, we're your parents, you got to listen to us. I'm like, well, don't think so.
No
Because I'm a parent
kidding.
myself, and you know, I will follow what I feel is right to follow. It could be right, could be wrong, but I will take the responsibility for making my own decisions.
Yeah. 100%.
So I think the only tradition that I really probably kept with was just um, kind of staying positive and optimistic. Because I could see my dad was trying his best to be positive even in a non-positive environment. And we both would listen to spiritual teachings together, like Wayne Dyer.
Yes.
Yeah, like we had cassette tapes of Wayne Dyer's. Listen
Yes.
to in the car at the bus stop, and I think that's what kept me going throughout my childhood. I'm like, okay, you know, stay positive, like there is a light at the end of the tunnel even though it's several years out. And that's actually what why no one really believed me, because they're like, what, like you're living through that but then you seem so happy and, you know, optimistic all the time. I'm like, well, maybe because I have to be, because otherwise I'm just going to be sad and depressed and have,
Yeah.
you know, thoughts that, you know, aren't really healthy. But in turn, I think what I realized recently actually was, you know, I kind of never allowed myself to really feel the emotions and really process them so that I can release all of that baggage.
Got it.
So I feel like I'm currently even, you know, going through that myself, because it's like every time I meet my parents and I get triggered by something, I'm like,
Yeah.
why do I feel getting, you know, keep getting triggered if I've emotionally detached and I'm not letting them affect me, because it is affecting me.
Yep.
So this is where I feel like, okay, I need to do like another up leveling and healing and really allow myself to process
Yep.
all the abuse, all the traumas, all the betrayals, all lack of trust. You know, because if you think about it, it's like if you were abused in your childhood, you know that those are your key stages in life where
Yep.
you're supposed to have been cared for, loved, protected, you know, by people that you feel like you know you're that's like your first line of trust right there. And if
Yep.
that fell through, then you know, it takes a lot for you to really understand, like, wow, like, you know, and that's going to affect the rest of your relationships if you don't really allow yourself to like process those and heal and move on. And I mean, I had a friend recently called me out on that. It's like, you know, you really haven't healed. And I'm like, no, I have. You know, like they don't affect me anymore. Like, well, why are you still talking about it then? Like, uh, hmm, yeah, why am I? Why? Because, you know, because I would go to my parents' house and, you
Yeah.
know, something would happen. I'm like, oh, I can't believe they would say this, you know, and they're still like this. And they're like, well, why is it affecting you? That means like you really need to, you know,
Yeah.
really process this. I'm like, wow, you know, you might be right.
Wow. Yeah. 100%. 100%. But I do believe what you're saying, that it is a process, and, you know, where we are now in our healing process is going to be different than where we are in 5 years. And that's an important thing to let people know, you know, that, you know, you might not be as far along as we are, but, you know, we're also not as far along as we'd want to be. So it's a continuous thing, you
Yeah,
know?
and I think one thing that I actually recently realized is when you've been abused for so long, especially during childhood, and you really haven't released all that trauma, you tend to, you know, it's conditioned you in a certain way. It's conditioned you to be abused, accept the abuse, and just to kind of keep the peace by being nice to the abusers, and with a ray of hope that, oh, they might change. Oh, like they're gonna change one day. Oh, they're gonna grow up, and kind of making excuses for them, and really putting all of your own needs and desires and wants to the side because you're so busy trying to conform to them so that you don't keep getting abused. And it's almost like you're being nice to them. And I'm not saying you have to be mean to them, but at some point you have to stand up for yourself. And I think
Yeah.
a day is gonna come where you've had enough and you're just gonna go scorched earth.
Yes.
Not that I've done that. I'm just And at some point you kind of have to do that and really tell them how you feel. And I recently actually just did that. Because at some point it's you're building all of this, within you, and if you haven't really had the courage to step up and really tell them how you feel, and then leave so they can process all this, and then release it and heal on your own, then you're just kind of bottling up all of this resentment and anger and frustration and hurt and pain within you, and keep trying to be nice to them, but they're sitting there, throwing like missiles at you, and you're keep showing them mangoes, like, hey, you want to take the mangoes? So I would urge just all women, and it's hard, it's extremely hard, because especially if it's gone on for so long, it's hard to kind of pinpoint, oh, I'm being abused. Physical abuse is very easy to catch because you're being physically hurt. The mental, psychological, emotional abuse is hard to identify and comprehend, and sometimes it does take another person to really call you out on that, like, you're being emotionally and psychologically abused, right? And it's like, what? No, I mean, because you feel like you have a lot of pride in, oh, I wouldn't fall for that, like, well, you have been.
Definitely.
And
also when it's our parents, we know that our parents like physically took care of us. They fed us, they housed us, if you have an education, helped with that, sports, help. So it's hard to turn around and be like, you did all this great stuff. However, in this one part, you did really, really bad. It seems kind of like a slap in the face, or at least for me. I'm not trying to project that on you, but for me, that's what it feels like, And
also, I think we're making, okay, so they had kids, and I know even to this day, those examples are exactly the examples my parents would use. Hey, we fed you, you had food on the table, you had a house, and, we took great care of you. I'm like, those are basic needs that every parent should be, taking care of for their children. Because otherwise, why did you have children? So you don't deserve like a gold medal for doing that. But, along with that came all the other abuse. So it's not that you provided all of these things with a genuine heart and didn't expect anything in return. What you expected in return was conformity. And hey, if you don't do these things, oh, you're gonna pay for it.
Absolutely.
And
it's a good way to put it. Thank you.
Right. And as a parent, and what I got all the time was like, oh, you'll understand when you're a parent. I'm like, so I am a parent. I have 3 kids. I'm like, yeah, I do understand how not to be.
Yeah, same.
Right. Like I these are basic needs that I'm providing for my kids. Now there are like, I teach this to my kids all the time. Like, okay, you do need to be grateful for what you do have. And yes, I could be a basic parent and only provide like basic needs. I could do that, but I'm not. But you also have to be grateful for all these other things. You're living a very privileged lifestyle. You have a beautiful house. You get all of these toys and gadgets, and going out to restaurants. It's not like you're just having PB&J every day, or scraps. So part of it, but also it's the act of showing love and meeting the 6 basic needs of every human being. And I don't think our parents' generation, at least mine, didn't get that concept. I think they're like, okay, well, she has food, she has a house, and she has us as parents because she could be living without parents. And I think that was, they set the bar like so low for themselves.
Hey, I love that you're talking about the 6 basic needs. Can you tell us what those are?
So Tony Robbins came up with this. He calls it the 6 basic needs, and a lot of people have kind of changed or morphed that into different things. But he talks about, if I can remember, so love, unconditional love, is a basic need. It's unconditional. It's not you conform to me and therefore I love you, or I'm abusing you because I love you. It's like, no, like I will love you as a parent, as a mom, as a father, regardless of what you do or say or how you act. And that's a need. It's not a want. So these are actual needs. And then I think there's certainty, there's uncertainty, and those are also needs. So was it love, unconditional love, certainty, uncertainty, growth is an actual need.
Yes.
And that's actually spiritual. Some of these are from a physical level, and some of them are really in tune to like your spiritual needs. And everyone kind of has a need for growth. And then there's two other ones.
Is growth with contribution, or is contribution?
Contribution was actually another one.
Okay.
Yes. So everyone kind of has a need to kind of give back to others. Some people might not really realize it's an actual need, which is why you feel great when you give to others, whether you're giving advice or whether you're giving some, monetarily, or you're offering your time to help out. So it is an actual need. Yeah, contribution. And then there's one other one. I'll have to look that up. But and then what they say
I found it. So it's certainty, variety, which is uncertainty.
Uncertainty, yeah.
Right. Significance.
Significance, yes. Yeah, that's
love and connection, growth and contribution.
And for people that have significance, because there's actual a quiz you can take to kind of see like which of these needs are kind of like what you hold highest.
Yeah.
And if significance is one of them, he actually advises you to change that. Because that's what turns into like narcissism, like NPD and all that kind of stuff, because you kind of have this need like, oh, I am more significant than you, but that's not really the true need.
Yeah.
The true need is like everyone has a need to feel significant in their lives.
Yeah.
But if you're seeking that validation of significance from an outside source, then that's what turns like unhealthy.
Exactly.
Yeah.
What's so funny is I actually went to Tony Robbins for the first time with my ex, who's a narcissist. And when we did that test, he came out as significance and certainty as the top two. And then Tony Robbins, within like a minute or so, said, oh, blah, 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 good for you, do the thing, blah, blah, blah. By the way, if your top two are significance and certainty, you better work on that.
Yeah.
And those were literally his like number, like so high. And I literally was just like, it's another sign. At that point, I didn't know what was happening to me, but it was another thing in my brain where I was like, I'm not fucking crazy. This is like an issue with these type of people.
Yeah. And I think, so I used to think like, okay, well, I'm not going to take this anymore. I'm going to get out of it. And I did that. And even any abusive relationships, even if it's emotionally abusive, like, okay, I'm going to get out of it, so I'm standing up for myself. But then recently I realized, well, maybe I've just been running from it. And I feel like I have healed, but I keep attracting people that keep doing it to me. So maybe I haven't healed fully.
Yeah.
And so I'm exploring things like my friend actually just told me about, there's something called quantum healing hypnosis technique that's out there.
Yes.
I'm going to try that pretty soon.
Nice. So speaking of that, I know that you did eventually marry, in Indian tradition. Can you talk, kind of about that? And I also want you to kind of touch on our childhoods and how that kind of plays a part in our, females as we get married.
Yeah, definitely plays a huge part. So again, like everything my parents stood for, I wanted the opposite of that. But a part of me was still scared of them. Not that they were going to abuse me physically again, but I felt like they were in control of part of me, or they had power and control over, like, subconsciously some part of me. And as much as I really wanted to not conform, not care about their values or opinions or religious beliefs, but a part of me did because I was still seeking their validation.
Yeah.
And I only realized that after I went through this whole marriage crisis that I'm like, wow, why do I keep seeking their validation? Like, I there's that hold was so strong that whatever I did in life, I felt like, oh, they're gonna be proud of me now, and then they're gonna start being nicer to me, and or they're gonna love me more because I've achieved all of these things. And it just never happened, right? It was always kind of like, oh, that's great, now you can focus on the next level. I'm like, can I just enjoy the moment for a second? Like, next level is like way down the line. Yeah, so I ended up, so they wanted me to marry, they wanted me to have a traditional arranged marriage, South Indian, Brahmin, the whole 100% there. And I allowed them, like, okay, well, I'll meet people who you find, not that I'm going to settle on that. And really nothing worked out. So I'm like, okay, well, I'm going to find someone on my own. And in my conscious brain was telling me, like, yeah, you need to find someone that's totally like not even Indian. Just to kind of get out of this cycle.
Yeah.
But then the other part, which is the larger subconscious part, is like, well, you're gonna have to deal with your parents for the rest of your life, and they're probably gonna disown you.
Yeah.
So like, why don't we just stick with Indian, but maybe not South Indian? So I went with North Indian.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah. So
Okay.
my soon-to-be ex is North Indian, and I thought I was being a total rebel. And what ended up happening was, so we had the whole, his parents, my parents are like, blah blah blah, like, oh, she's from the US, so he's from India, and he came when he was in college. And he wasn't the typical Indian guy that was from India, so I thought he was different. And he knew I was different because I was not going to be one of those traditional Indian housewives that gave up my life for my husband after we get married and things like that.
Yeah.
And so we met, and then we're like, oh yeah, like, let's get this to work. And it was okay for a while. And actually what ended up happening was, after the marriage, my parents and him became very close. Wow. Probably like a lot closer than I was with my parents. So it was almost like I attracted him to my parents versus me.
Wow.
And I caught on to that very quickly. And was like, you guys can just live happily as like one big happy family, kind of like leave me out of it. Because they have a need to, they want to feel needed.
Okay.
And I was always so independent and kind of a rebel that I always gave them the feeling of like, I don't really need you guys. Like, I have my own life now.
Yeah.
I have my own money. I have a job. I can take care of myself. I can make my own decisions. Like, I am a grown-up adult. And they were kind of like, no. Like, you got to listen to us, and you need us, and you got to, we are parents, and you need your parents. I'm like, well, I don't need a parent. I don't need to be parented.
Yeah.
But he kind of, I think, innately had that need because he was a lot more traditional than I thought he was. Okay. And he had a very different relationship with his parents, who are actually, like, he had a great childhood from what I know and what I've witnessed. But I think his lack was that they were just not very they didn't show love. I think, because they were also in India, and in India they don't really like show. They don't really say things like, "Oh, well, we love you." Give hugs and things like that. And he was also the middle child, so I think he had the whole middle child syndrome going on.
Got it.
And I think when he met my parents, and then once they kind of got over the oh my gosh, they're getting married part, then they both bonded, because my parents would be like, oh, we're do you want us to bring food? He's like, yeah, bring food. And like, oh, do you want us to come help take care of the children for you? Like, yeah, come on over anytime. And I was like, hey, wait a second. Like, we need to take care of our own kids. We don't need food from them. We can make our own food. And I was trying to be, hey, we need to establish our own boundaries.
Yeah.
And there's no boundaries in the Indian system.
Okay.
It's like everyone's, because they all live together in India, joint families. So they really attracted each other. And that kind of led to a lot of friction and conflict between us, because I'm here, like, raised in this country, a lot more independent. I'm like, hey, we got to do this on our own. We can use their help as needed, but we shouldn't be like so codependent on them.
Yeah.
And I think he had a need to be codependent, and they had a need to be codependent on me. But then
Yeah.
I wasn't giving it to them. They're like, hey, he looks like her husband's like all on board with that.
Wow.
So now I'm having to kind of break all of these cycles, and from all of them, like, wow, there was so much unhealthy dependencies going on here that I need to kind of be the person. Everyone's gonna hate me, but hey, I gotta finally look at my own needs and break all of these cycles.
100%. How long were you married for?
13 years. So we
Wow.
technically are still married. We're going through the whole divorce process. So
Yeah.
probably by next year, it would be 14 years that
Yeah.
we've been married, and about 16 years that we've known each other.
Awesome. Awesome. I want to say a quick hello to those of you that are watching live. We appreciate it. If this subject resonates with anybody that you know, please feel free to share the link. I want to ask you, this was very interesting for me when you and I first originally talked, like a long, long time ago. You were kind of talking about how your parents set you up for marriage, or didn't set you up for marriage. I kind of want you to talk about that, because this was so interesting to me on two wavelengths. One, I didn't um what is that called when like you empathize with you? Empathize? I didn't empathize with you. But then on the other hand, I thought about it and I'm like, wait a minute. Same. But like didn't view it as a tradition. Kind of just didn't happen. Like no one taught me. So I kind of want you to dive in on the tradition, and how you kind of navigated through your role as a wife, the control you had, and your parents kind of setting you up.
Sure. I mean, yeah. So I mean, the positive ways that they set me up was like, okay, you got to get a job, you got to, have your own living, and kind of do good in the world by being successful in your career. So that was the good part. Now, the part that I feel like I was set up for failure was that my dad managed my money, until I got married. And I never really uh, asked to manage my own money. I mean, I had like my own pot of money that I, for daily household expenses, but all investments and stocks and really the whole, business side of just living, my dad took care of all that. And not even once did they say, hey, Jothi, we're going to set you up for success in life. You got to know how to balance your checkbooks. You got to know how to do, investments and grow your money. This is how you do it. And we're going to now give ownership to you, and teach you how to, like, none of that happened. And then, just other things that my mom could have taught me. Okay, here's how to kind of basically survive on your own. Like, here's how you do the laundry. Here's how you, can cook like quick meals. And I think she felt like she was trying, but then again, my mom and I, I just kept, I just wanted to kind of get out of her hair, or not be in, visibility mode. So because I never knew what was going to happen. Mm-hmm. So I never got those lessons. Now, when I got married, once I got over the whole North Indian thing, my dad then thought of him as like a son. So, right. So he was kind of like, oh, okay, we're going to now hand over all of your money to him so he can manage it for you. Which I didn't even know happened.
Wow.
And he did, he did manage it, but it then I kind of became like a commodity, right? It's like, oh, I'm being transferred from one set of power and control tactics to another set of power and control tactics.
Yep.
And then, my ex was also like, oh, okay, well, I'm gonna, you don't need to know about what I'm doing with the money because I got it under control. And hey, you have a decent life, and it's not like I lost all the money or something like that. So I kind of built that trust with him too. I'm like, okay, well, I don't really need to know this stuff, and I gave he managed like all the money, like
Wow.
all the business side of the marriage. And I think that's where my parents really set me up for failure. I mean, later on, they're like, oh, well, we didn't know you did that. I'm like, really? I mean, not once did you question it. So that's one part. I think the other part was also just the Indian mentality of, well, the wife is there to support the husband.
Got it.
So you can't really outshine him.
Got it.
And, I was a cybersecurity leader, but then last year, I started really getting into the wellness. I started my own wellness practice because there's a whole big healing journey that I did on the wellness side after my third baby was born. But, that's a whole different topic. But I, learned all of these healing modalities and holistic wellness practices. And I started my own practice and I wrote my books. I really wanted, like, okay, wow, one day I'm going to leave cyber and kind of, branch out and do all of these other things.
Yeah.
And at some point, I think it became obvious, like, I had a path and I had a mission. And then it became a competition thing with my ex. It's like, whoa, like, okay, if you become so successful, you don't need me anymore. And I'm like, I never really needed you for money. He's like, oh, no, you need it. You need me. You can't live without me, kind of thing. I'm like, pretty sure I can. And
wow,
coming from a very traditional Indian parents, if they hadn't seen like the true colors from him, it would have been like a slam dunk. Oh, Jothi, like, you are the cause of the demise of your marriage. It's all your fault. You need to try. I mean, actually, they did say that to us up to a certain point. Like, oh, you need to fix this. Like, you need to stop having dreams and visions. Like, just have a normal job, take care of your kids, take care of your husband, and, forget about all this stuff. Like, do all these things after the kids are in college, like 20 years down the line.
Wow.
And that's kind of like the mentality that, and even after they saw everything that went on with, the divorce part, even then my dad is like, and this is one thing that he said that I'm still processing this. Like, well, your communication skills are your strength, but they're also your weakness. I'm like, well, how is that a weakness? Well, because you can come off as being very intimidating. So basically, you need to kind of, lower yourself a little bit so that you can kind of meet the standards of the person you're with and maybe other people. And I'm like, wow, you want me to lower myself to be at the same level as, the person I'm with currently or anybody else. And instead of telling me like, hey, you're up here, maybe the other person needs to up level themselves.
Yeah.
Right. So
yeah.
So those are all, and and even now, I am regarded as the rebel child who's very rude and disrespectful, who's arrogant or doesn't really conform, and they wanted me to apologize for all of these things. I'm like, I am not going to apologize. If that's your perception, that's your perception. I have my own perception, and I hadn't really put that out there, and only until recently, where this is how I really felt about you guys.
Yeah, 100%.
So,
can you talk about the turning point in your marriage? I mean, you were married for a really long time. Was there like a definitive thing or things that happened?
There was, I think it was the pandemic was a blessing in disguise, because it really showed people's true colors, whether it's in a marriage or friends or family. I think, you're put to the test, and either you're going to become stronger together through the crisis, or you're just going to break apart.
Yeah.
And I feel like if your foundation was built on like, glass and not brick stones, you broke apart.
100%.
So it really shed a lot of light in our marriage, but also relationship with my parents. And so it's been kind of a long couple years to really understand like the roots of how far it goes back. And I think even from the marriage, right from the beginning, I was putting my own needs and my own self-worth down.
Yeah.
Because I was kind of putting him on a pedestal. And it's funny because whoever saw that is now like, yeah, we were wondering why you're doing that.
Really?
Right? I'm like, why didn't you tell me? Like, well, would you have listened? I mean, Because, it's like, why are you taking this from him? And why do you think like you're lesser than him? Like you're kind of being this it's like a disposable item over here.
Yeah.
And I'm like, wow, like, so it's just recently hit me like, wow, like this goes back like before him. Like this goes back all the way to my childhood where I did feel disposed. I did feel unworthy. I did feel unloved, or it felt like, oh, my worth was predicated on my grades or like what I had to do to conform.
Got it.
So now I feel like I'm kind of breaking out of my cocoon here and be like, okay, you know what? I need to like stop being scared of all, of not conforming. And I know it's going to raise a lot of, shuffle a lot of feathers over here because, we have family all around the world. And I know, my parents are like, oh my gosh, what are they going to think? And I'm like, you know what? I really don't give a crap. I mean, if they want to conform and pretend to be happy, that's on them. But I can only take so much, and it's time that I kind of bring my voice. And I don't think I would have ever had this podcast, a couple of years ago. I'm like, oh no, like I can't say anything.
Yeah.
What if somebody hears it and then that's gonna cause a lot of disruption.
100%. I want to ask, what do you think is, or do you think there are a large amount of individuals that do what you kind of mentioned in the beginning of our podcast, where you were saying, or not beginning, but you were saying that you feel as if you kind of picked your partner for your parents? Do you think that that's something that we as females kind of do often?
So I think just based on what I've been learning through all my healing modalities is there's always a part of you that attracts people into your life. Now, if you're attracting positive people, then that they're getting attracted to that positive traits within you or the positive feelings. But then if you're attracting kind of not so, or maybe I would call it learning experiences into your life with people that maybe aren't so positive, then there's something within you that attracted that to you.
Yeah.
So I think that part of me was the feeling of unworthiness, not really valuing myself, my own needs, kind of putting myself down. And then when I attracted him, I was looking for something very specific at that time. Like I was looking for someone who's just kind of open-minded, lets me be me, but I didn't even know maybe who I was because I was still reaching out. And a part of me wanted that feeling of being like protected because I felt like, oh, no one protected me in my childhood. I felt like my dad was trying, but as a male figure, I'm like, well, you could have done a better job. Mm-hmm. When, if there's a male abuser, then it's different because the female might not, be able to stand up.
Yeah.
And mine was different. So, and I get it now. I'm like, okay, he did the best he could given the skills and the situation, but I always had that feeling, like I wasn't protected. And, when I met when I had my exes and, my husband, I kind of felt like, oh, okay, well, he seems like a person that's going to protect me, and not abuse me, at least physically.
Yeah.
So my standards are very low.
Got it.
So again, I kind of attracted very low standards, and I kept putting myself down. So every time I would have like see these red flags in him, I would kind of make excuses for them. Like, oh, well, that's not a big deal. Like that's just because he had this experience or he did that. And then I would just kind of keep crossing those things off my own needs. Like, well, it's okay. I can meet my own needs and I don't need him for that.
Got it.
Right?
Okay.
So until enough is enough one day and you're like, oh my gosh, like why did I do that? And then as you start, and I think that's what happened last year. It's like I started kind of up-leveling myself. Like I started healing, more parts of me that I felt were broken.
Yeah.
Or weaknesses. Yeah. And then I kept getting more and more confidence in myself. Like, hey, I got this. Like, I don't need someone. It's nice to have him and I wanted him as a, as an equal partner.
Yeah.
But then I also started asking for more of my needs to be met.
Yeah.
And I think it came to a certain point where it's like, whoa, like you have all of these needs now. I'm like, well, and it's like, oh, and you need me to meet them. I'm like, no, I'm meeting my own needs. And I don't need you for money. I don't need you for, love. I don't need you for anything. But we're married. So, you know, there's, it's like you would want the other person to kind of meet you where you're at and, support each other.
Yeah.
So
Mentally and emotionally.
In all ways, right?
Yeah.
And I think when that became kind of a competition thing, it's like, what? Like, why is he thinking I'm like his competition? Like, we're together in this. Like, if I succeed, you succeed.
Yeah.
And if you succeed, I succeed. But I think, so I think as you heal parts of yourself, like your other relationships start changing.
Yeah.
And then it could change for the better because the other person's like, whoa, okay, she's up leveling. Oh, let me also up level. Or they could kind of be like an immature masculine or feminine and be like, oh my gosh, she's up leveling. Let me try to like pull her down.
Pull her down. Wow.
So right. And that's kind of what ended up happening.
Got it.
Yeah. And I feel like that the same thing happened with my parents too. Like when they kind of started helping out, they're like, oh, we're the heroes now. So she's gonna now realize how much she needs us.
Got it.
And then I'm like, no, like you are kind of the cause of this.
Got it. Yeah.
You played a big role. You weren't the cause because he has to take responsibility as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
But you played a huge role.
Yeah.
And I now realize like, whoa, I need to like set my boundaries for my life moving forward.
Absolutely.
So that I'm not going from one power person to another power person and back to my family as a power person. Like I need to take, internal power and control of myself.
Absolutely.
And my own life. And
absolutely
really start healing those parts so that I don't attract, any more power players, as we call it.
Yeah. I want to ask, and I like to ask this to the females that I speak to who have gone through divorce with children. Not that this what this podcast is about, but because that's a fear. That's a real fear that mothers have about leaving their spouses, their children. So what were some of your fears that you had regarding your children in divorce? And what have you kind of done to help heal or mend anything that's been happening in your world with that?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a fear because, everyone wants, it feels better to live in a comfort zone, right? It's like, okay, it'll be easier to just kind of, live the rest of your life in this, not really happy place, but it's comfortable because, it's like a known devil is better than an unknown devil quote.
Yeah.
But at some point, you have to have the confidence to leave and say enough is enough. If you're at that point, I would not, suggest just kind of leaving just because he didn't do the dishes or something.
Yeah.
Like that. But at some point, if you feel like you're being abused or you're, that person is really totally disrespecting you, and there's no way to really work on the marriage together, or it's just like a one-sided thing, then yeah, it actually is best for you to leave. And it took a lot for me to really get to a state of acceptance because as a mom you're like, okay, well, I got to keep the family together because that's what's in the best interest of the children.
Yeah.
Stay together. But then I look at my parents' relationship and I look at all these other relationships where there was abuse from either party. And really it's kind of like, is it really what's best for the children? Because you're just teaching them, just especially if you're a woman being abused, you're just teaching your children, well, it's okay, just take the abuse and just stick it out, and your needs don't really matter, you don't really have a voice, and just kind of go with the flow.
Yep.
And I felt like at some point I really had to make that decision for myself. Like, you know what? I need to cut the chains. Like this is, when I look at my parents' relationship and their parents and, and my husband's, I mean, I think our generation is put on this earth to really look at all of that and make different decisions than our parents' generations made.
Absolutely.
And I kind of felt like I had to do that. I'm like, wow, like I have 2 girls and 1 boy. Do I really want to teach my girls you know what, whoever you find, you just got to stick it out. And regardless of how you're being treated, doesn't really matter. Oh, you have goals and dreams. It doesn't matter. Once you get married, your goal and dream is just to take care of the husband. And I'm like, that's not teaching them, positive values. And I'm also not teaching my son. I'm like, oh yeah, when you get married, you can treat your wife whatever way you want, and she's just gonna have to take it. So I had to kind of put my fears aside. And yes, part of me still was kind of like, oh, it'd be a lot easier just to like go back.
Yeah.
Like it's just, I don't have to worry about all of this. But
Yeah.
but I know that's not the right thing to do. And I know, okay, I am going to feel a little discomfort and fear and anxiety in kind of breaking out of the cocoon and kind of branching out. But that's what change is all about. That's what your evolution is all about.
Absolutely.
And for my kids, I mean, therapy, I mean, is kind of a must. Especially if they've gone through like a traumatic breakup with their parents.
Yeah.
And that's one thing I didn't have growing up because my parents were kind of in denial that I needed therapy.
Yep.
They're still in denial. They're like, oh, you didn't have a traumatic childhood. I'm like, okay.
Yep.
Well, the fact that I identify, they're like, well, your children are going to say they had a traumatic childhood. I'm like, yeah, and they are going through a lot of trauma right now. That's why I'm getting them help.
Exactly.
And they need that help. Support system at school, like if they can talk to counselors or establish some level of support there. And also whoever the parent that's kind of being the higher person, just sitting down with the kids, like as much hatred or resentment or anger you have about the other parent, not really voicing that to the children other than to say like, look, at some point the children, like you said before, they know.
Yeah.
They know.
Yeah.
And they can see it too. So regardless of who's saying what, they can see it in action and behavior, how they show love, and all of that. So I stopped kind of, because I was really worried, like, oh my gosh, what is he saying about me? Are they going to think like I caused this? But they know, like they've come to terms, and there's and they're getting the therapy that they need. And I think as they get older, you can probably be more open with them and explain things a little bit more in detail. But it is also, I know I've read a lot of the psychologists say like, well, you should still show some form of like unison just as co-parents.
Yeah.
And I find that very interesting because it's kind of like, well, unison comes when both parties are willing to show unison.
Okay. Yeah. Makes sense. Yeah.
So you can try your best and show that you're the bigger person here. And really, you have to let go of the outcome. Yeah. And if the other person wants to be the bigger person as well, that's great. But if they don't, you can't really force them to be.
Exactly.
So yeah, so I think it's just there is a lot of fear and anxiety around it, but you have to really start thinking of not just your own needs, but are you really doing what's best for the children by kind of sticking with the family? And I would say give it all you got. I mean, I really felt like the last 2 years, I tried every possible way of trying to keep things together.
Awesome.
But at some point, it you do have to make that call. Okay, enough is enough, and it's time to, move to the next level in your life. And if that person wants to come along, great. If not, you got to do what you got to do.
Exactly. What steps have you taken to heal from the mindset that you previously had?
A lot. I think it, like we discussed before, it's every level you get to, you take certain steps, you try different healing modalities. I mean, I'm always looking. I think the number one thing is changing your mindset to constantly learn and have different experiences, not feel like, okay, I'm done, I'm done healing, I'm done doing this, and that's it. So I think as you seek, the answers kind of come to you. And then you have to also be very cognizant of what's actually going on and kind of come to acceptance to that. Because like I said before, like I thought, oh yeah, I'm completely healed and, I'm good. Like I've emotionally detached from my parents and from my husband, and nothing can really bother me anymore. but then I kept getting bothered. So some,
Absolutely.
a good friend had to call me out on that. Jyoti, like, I don't think, you kind of really need to heal. And like, well, no, I'm healed. Like, I'm completely, this doesn't really bother me. It's like, well, it kind of is bothering you. And I'm like, no, well, is it? And sometimes it does take a third party to kind of call you out on something, and it's up to you what to do with that information, and not feel like you have to defend yourself. Good friends are there to be a good friend, not just to say, what you want them to say. And, so I think every time I get to a certain level, like, there's a certain amount of healing, and then you kind of keep going along in that state until something else triggers you. Then you realize, like, oh, okay, I need to really, look into that and work on it. So I've tried, I actually became a Reiki master. That was one of the first modalities that really helped me with the energy healing.
Yes.
Through the Japanese technique.
Yes.
Meditations, qigong, which is another form of like energy. I've also tried EFT, which is like emotional freedom technique.
Yes.
To really process things. So now I think my newest thing is the quantum healing hypnosis technique. So I think, it's like the universe. Actually, through this whole marriage crisis, what I was able to really hone in on is this, like, my connection with, spirit, universe, God, whatever, you want to believe in, and just knowing that that's there. And, there's a higher power that always has your back. And sometimes you just have to surrender.
Yeah.
And know that there is a bigger plan. Whatever's happening is for the best. Because all of last year, like, I was trying all kinds of things to kind of keep the marriage together. Like, okay, he's going to turn around. Oh, he's going to grow up, or he's going to wake up from this midlife crisis, or whatever he's going through. And it didn't happen. Until somebody told me, like, Jothi, just surrender. Just surrender to the universe. I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, no, like, I'm not doing that. Like, maybe the universe has a bigger plan for you, or God has a bigger plan for you. And maybe his role in your life is, come to a close to a certain, you have kids, he's never going to really go away, but his significant role maybe has come to a close in your life.
Yeah.
Right. And maybe he's not meant to kind of travel the next chapter, and I actually really believe that everyone comes into your life at different times, and they serve a purpose, and you serve a purpose in their life. And some are meant to go with you for like the long haul, and some are just meant to be, in those particular chapters.
Exactly. I want to read what Christy wrote here, because this is interesting. Can you read that?
Sure. Yeah. So Christy says that's important, that both parties need to show unison. And sometimes when one party will not be civil, then ties need to be cut, unfortunately. And that is very hard to deal with. And that's absolutely true. At the end of the day, you have to feel proud of your own decisions, actions, words even. And, we're not perfect. I'm not saying that everything that came out of my mouth was absolutely golden and perfect. But you try your best, and, you can only be the higher person for so long. At some point, you have to do what's right for you, and what you think is right for the kids. And if the other person is not showing unison, or they're not being civil, that's really on them. And I don't know who believes in karma, or, hey, what goes around comes around, like that sort of thing. But it really does. And a lot of us, I know I did this. Like, I felt like, oh, he must be, or this person needs to be punished for what they did, or what they said, or how they acted. And really, at the end of the day, it's not up to me. There is a higher source, and all of this will be, balanced out and taken care of, probably in a much better way than you could have ever imagined. So it's really not up to us to make sure, like, this person, or we get justice because of this person faced their consequences or their punishment. And a lot of us spend a lot of time with that. Like, no, I'm not going to give him this. Like, even if you're going through a divorce, like, no, I'm never going to agree to that. And you know, at some point you have to check yourselves. Like, is it your ego talking, or are you really looking out for the children's best interest?
100%.
You know, and, you know, if you have a good lawyer, I know they say like lawyers just want money. I mean, if you have a good one, I mean, I felt like I had a really good one who really kept me in check. They're like, Jothi, is this really going to matter like 10 years down the line?
Wow. Okay.
Like, and you know, your ego's like, yeah, it will. Yeah, it's going to matter. And like, really? So let's just say you find somebody else, you're living happily, you know, this is all like in the past. All you're doing is co-parenting with him. Is it really going to matter? And I really had to kind of visualize that. I'm like, oh, okay.
Wow.
Right? And if the other person also has a good lawyer, that's the counsel they should be giving. Now, going along with Christine's point, you might also find that they might actually have a good counsel, but their
Yes.
ego might be high enough that they're like, well, we don't care what our counsel says. Like, I'm paying you, do your job, and just do what I ask you to do.
Good point.
And, you know, that could happen as well. So at some point, you just have to, if you're a nice person, I know, Sabrina, like, you know, you're probably in the same boat as me. It's like, when you're just a genuinely nice person, you don't really think about being like in this fighting mode or like warrior mode.
It's very uncomfortable.
You know, it's uncomfortable. It's just draining. That's just not your resting state. But sometimes you have to put on that role because you're fighting for your children. You're not fighting really for yourself, right? If you didn't have children, you got a divorce. Oh, it'd be like, oh yeah, just, you know, get what you feel is right and then get out of there.
Yeah, exactly.
If you have children, like, you know, I had to kind of think to myself, like, okay, I'm not fighting for me. You know, I'm fighting for my children. What is in the best interest of the children?
Exactly.
You know, and at some point you do have to release. And, you know, let's just say you end up at 50-50. Yes, as a mother, you are going to have those fears. Like, oh, what is he going to do with the children when I'm not there? Is he going to shape up? Is he going to not feed them? But you kind of, at some point, you have to allow that. You just have to allow it and then see what happens.
Yeah.
And, you know, and my lawyer told me that too. Like, one of two things will happen. Either the other parent's going to step up because they have to as a parent, which is great. That's what you want. Or they're going to fall and crash. But you can't predict that for the other person. You can't say, well, I'm not going to give this to you because this is what's going to happen, because you don't really know what's going to happen.
I like that. I love that you're saying that. You can't predict it, because you can't.
And you can't predict what happens in your life too. I mean,
good point.
You know, we're trying to establish all this control and power over a situation. Who knows what's going to happen in your own life?
Yep.
You know,
you're right.
Right? So you might get a career boost, and now you're like, oh my gosh, but I have the kids like 80%, and I want this, but then do I not take, you know, my up leveling in my career, or you know, so there's a lot that can happen. I mean, you never know anything that's going to happen, or you could have a health crisis, you know. And I know several friends that are going through that. Like, they got the divorce, they got more custody than their spouse, and then they had a huge health crisis.
Oh my!
And then, you know, so there's lots of, you know, battles after that. So it's like, okay, you know, just kind of, again, surrendering, you know, really helped me. It's like, okay, I'm just going to surrender. Whatever is best is going to happen.
Absolutely.
And, you know, whatever is meant for you is never going to escape you. So if we're meant to keep it together, it would have happened. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to surrender to the fact that this is what's meant to happen now. Like, we were meant to, you know, split at this stage in time.
Yeah.
You know, and then whatever else. But also to just keep yourself open to the new chapter and like new love and new people and new experiences. It is going to take a lot of healing for you to really heal from this and process all these emotions and then release them, and then be in that little bit of an uncomfortable state of like, oh, I feel like so open and vulnerable now. But that's what's needed to allow in, like, you know, new love.
Exactly.
New experiences.
Exactly.
Somebody just really quick, you know, gave me an analogy that really sticks in my head. It's kind of like you know, you have all of this like boxes and used toys and like all these gadgets like from your house that are just like old and doesn't work anymore. You're carrying all of this stuff
Yeah.
from like over the the last 15 years, and
Yeah.
then the doorbell rings. And you open the door, and then it's like this Amazon guy with like a shiny new package, like woohoo! I'm like, oh my gosh, this is great. Well, but how do I even take it? Because I have all this like stuff in my hands.
Yes.
So at some point, you have to kind of release all that stuff and
Yes.
quote unquote feel kind of naked because they're kind of like, oh, I feel so empty, like I'm alone or I don't have anything. But then you have to be like that in order to be able to receive the new package, which is
Yes.
right. So and people feel that from a mile away. Like if you're holding on to emotional
Yeah.
baggage, and then you're trying to attract you know uh, new people or new experiences, they can feel like you still haven't gotten over this.
Yep.
Or you
100%.
haven't healed, you haven't
Yeah.
processed, and you say you're emotionally detached, but you're not.
Yep. I
So
totally get it.
yeah, so it's
Totally.
scary, but I think it's
Necessary. Yeah, it's necessary. What lessons do you think people can learn from your life or the story that you just told?
I mean, there's a lot, and it keeps going. Right? It's like you never stop learning, you never stop having learning experiences, because that is what your life's meant for.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I would say for me, the biggest lessons are it's okay to reach out for help, reach out for support, get any sort of therapy. Just start somewhere, because I feel like as a strong, independent woman, I felt like I didn't really need help back then. I mean, if you asked me before the pandemic, I was trying to be super woman and super mom and super career person. Like I could do it all. I don't need help. I got this. I'm independent, and I took a lot of pride in that.
Yeah.
And I had to stop myself during this whole crisis. Like, wait, no, you know what? I need help. I can't do this on my own. I mean, I can do it on my own, but there's help out there. There are people that want to support you. They're genuinely interested. They love you. They want to support you. There's therapists out there that can help. There's free services, which I found as well. So it's not that you have to spend a lot of money. It's just, but you have to take that first step and realizing that you are not an island. No one's an island.
Yeah.
So reach out. It's okay to ask for help and support. You don't have to do it all. And if you're trying to do it all, really ask yourself, like, what do you like? Why do you feel the need to do it all? Like, who are you seeking validation from?
Good point. Wow.
I mean, someone really called me out on that too. Like, why do you feel the need to do all this? Like, are you trying to get a trophy from someone? Because no one knows all the different parts of you except for you. Like, you know how hard, like everything that you're doing, but nobody else. They like your boss gets only the career part of you. Your spouse might only get like how good of a mom you are, possibly depending on your relationship. Your friends only get that part of you. So really, no one knows everything that you're doing except for you. So who are you seeking this?
Wow.
Like, wow, yeah. I'm like, and that takes. I was in denial as well. I'm like, I'm not seeking validation.
Wow, that's so interesting. I've never heard it that way, and that is so true.
Yeah, and you can give yourself prizes for doing the smallest thing, because you're seeking your own validation for doing 100 billion things. But so why not just seek validation from yourself or your higher power every day, just for doing, hey, I woke up today and I got ready, and I got the kids out of the house, for their morning routine. That's great.
Yeah.
Not a lot of people can say that. Hey, I got dinner ready on the table. I am proud of myself because I had a headache. I could have just like lie down, like, hey, you guys are on your own, but I didn't do that. But that's it. I didn't get down to like all these 50 other things on my list, and that's okay.
Awesome.
So just kind of we put so much pressure as women on ourselves. We feel like we have to be this perfect person, and that was another thing. I was so optimistic and like positive my whole life that at some point I didn't really allow myself to feel the negative quote unquote, like not so positive emotions.
Yeah.
And I kind of felt like, oh my gosh, like why am I crying right now? Okay, I gotta get over it. I gotta get back to work. Okay, let me just like brush it aside. And eventually it is gonna get to you, either physically, because you don't want it to manifest physically at some point. So it's okay. Just allow yourself to process these emotions. Ask yourself, okay, this happened. Come to acceptance that it happened. It didn't feel great. If you were betrayed, you're hurt, you're in pain. You have to kind of allow yourself to go through it, because that's the only way out.
Absolutely.
And then find different. I always found that like it's not one healing technique that really works. It's just a combination of different things, and you have to find what works for you. I wouldn't say, oh, this hypnosis is great and that's it. Like only do that.
Yep, 100%.
Yeah,
and for different people.
Yeah, exactly.
And the three things that worked for you, only one of them might work for me.
Right, and it might work to get you to a certain level, and then after that, you have to then see, okay, at this level, it's like a video game.
Yeah.
You shoot all these bad guys at one level, and you get all of these whatever prizes or something or points. Then you get to the next level, and it's like a whole different ball game.
Yeah.
Right. It's maybe like bigger bad actors. Because life is always setting you up for the next level, right?
Speaking of that, how do you decide to show up for your life now?
I show up just being the best I can be for that day. I am not thinking of like, oh, this is what I'm going to do like 10 years from now or 5 years. I mean, I have my goals and my visions, but every day I'm like, okay, I am alive. I am grateful for being alive. I'm healthy, and just really trying to enjoy the present moment, because once I start thinking of, oh, is this going to happen and that's going to happen, you just kind of go down a downward spiral of like anxiety and stress and overwhelm. And then if I kind of keep myself in the past, then you're just kind of living in the past. So I'm trying to be more like just present in the moment. And when I feel like my thoughts are drifting to past or future, I try to, bring it back into perspective and like, okay, you know what? I have a task to do at work. I'm going to focus on that task. I'm going to get it done. I'm going to feel proud of myself for getting it done. Oh, what else do we have to do in the moment? Oh, I took care of my son's, boo-boos. Okay, go, Joe.
Yes.
Because the more you kind of just seek your own validation, or the only person you seek validation from is a higher source, not another human being.
Yeah.
Then the more you kind of get more of that. Right? It's like, oh, great. I got out in time. I took care of all these things. Like, great. And then just kind of celebrating the wins. And people see that. Like my children see that energy as well. They're like, oh, wow, like you seem really happy. I'm like, yeah. Why? What is there not to be happy about?
Yes.
Like, oh, okay. Well, and then they start being happy, and because the more anxious energy you carry, you're just kind of attracting more of that, and you're also projecting it onto others.
Yep. I always say that my son is actually like my biggest advertisement as far as what I preach, practice what I preach, because I'm constantly in a very happy, optimistic, positive state of mind. And people who meet me often are like, are you just fronting? Like, are you just pretending? Are you two different people? You can't be this happy all of the time. But my son is now 17, and he is the most positive, optimistic, loving, caring, like never has a bad day, never says a negative thought. And it's funny, while I was raising him, I was constantly thinking to myself, as my son is an experiment. And I know that sounds stupid, but I was constantly thinking to myself, what if I did everything opposite of the way I was raised? Like everything. And not only opposite, but like opposite to the 100th power. Mm-hmm. So like love as much, optimistic as much, happy as much, even to the point of like, the toxic positivity that's now like this thing. You can't be. I did it. I was as toxic positivity as you could possibly imagine. And not only did it work for me, like I think that that's just a bunch of hoopla. It totally worked for me. I was in a complete state of depression. I had anxiety all of the time. And I forced myself to live in positive. I forced myself to be optimistic. I forced myself to live in love every day, no matter what was happening to me. And not only am I who I am now, which is like 10 times better than I ever thought mentally, emotionally, than where I thought I could ever be, because I was in such a state of depression. But now I have my son who's right beside me, 6'2", works out every single day, healthy mindset, healthy emotionally, healthy physically. And you can do it. Like you can do that as a mother. You can come from a state of sadness and darkness, and you can rise up into light and brightness, and you can raise your children to be the exact same way. But it's a choice. It's an absolute choice on our part as parents.
It is, and you're absolutely right. And I think, just to caveat that a little bit, and it's okay to have feelings that aren't positive sometimes.
Yeah.
Because I felt the same way as you. And at sometimes, like, especially for going through like uprooting of your family, I was like, oh, I can't cry in front of them because I need to kind of be strong for them. And at some point I just broke down.
Yeah.
And then my kid's like, oh my gosh, like mommy's crying that somebody died or something. I'm like, no, I just feel like that and I had to be really upfront. Like, I feel like I was, this was like partly my fault. And, I feel like I'm just a bad mom for allowing this to happen. And then really my kids were like, what are you talking about? Like, this happened to you just like it happened to us.
Yeah.
And you didn't, like, it's not like you guys like were fighting and then you made a joint decision. Like, this was not my decision, like, at all.
Yeah.
And they saw that. I'm like, oh, you guys see that? Like, yeah, we know what's happening here.
That's awesome.
We know there's nothing that you did, and like, it's okay to cry, mom. I'm like, and I, of course, I cried more after that. I was like, oh my gosh, really. I'm like, wow, who's the parent here? But I think it just allowed them to see me as a human being and not as a super mom.
Yeah.
And sometimes I feel like, yes, I'm going to put everything in a positive spin to a
That's
certain
what it
degree,
is.
but I'm also going to let them know, like, yeah, I mean, I feel scared as well. I'm also sad. I'm also angry. I'm also resentful at times. But then I really need to, allow myself to process that, get the help I need. And then I also talked to a therapist. I told my kids that too.
Yeah.
And so, because you can see it manifesting in kids in different ways. Like, if the kids are depressed, they might show it as anger.
Yeah.
And if they keep staying in that mode, it's a little tiring as a mom to be like, oh my gosh, like this, these kids are just like so angry all the time. Then like, oh wow, okay, you know what? I need to take a step back. Oh, they're hurting.
Yeah.
They're not trying to be, disruptful, but they're hurting inside. And I told them, like, I'm hurting too, and I don't want to yell at you. I don't want to, have you face consequences because you're lashing out because I am the safe parent here for you to lash out too.
Yeah.
And I get that. Doesn't mean, but I have my own needs and I have my own standards, and I'm not going to keep tolerating that, because what you really need is help.
Yeah.
What you really need is to allow yourself process the hurt. It's okay to feel sad. Just cry it out. I'm here and I still love you. And they're like, oh, okay. And then they started like little by little changing.
Yeah.
And now you'd see them catching themselves, especially my son, because he's about to like hit his sister. I'm like, wouldn't do that. He's like, okay. Like, yeah, breathe, like slow breaths, not like
yeah.
But it's, so I feel like
I love that you're adding that, because that is what it is. It's communication. So like what you were talking about earlier on, that what your parents were kind of like giving you a hard time about, that communication where you're overly communicating, is the catalyst, I guess, in the positivity. So it's speaking and communicating your actual feelings as they are, sad, depressed, anger, whatever it is, but then being able to push past it because you're not sitting in it and push past it, and then continue to live positively, and optimistically and focusing more so on that than the negativity.
Yeah. And I mean, everything can have an optimistic spin to it.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like, okay, allowing them to process their not so positive feelings, but then kind of having them reach higher. Like, okay, well, hey, let's look at the positive in this, right?
Yeah.
Like, hey, you guys get to do this, you guys get to do that. Hey, we're gonna, go here, we're gonna go there, and that can happen. And that's kind of teaching them life lessons for anything, because I'm more of a go with the flow person. So like, hey, we're gonna go to this water park, and we get there's like a huge line, and of course, my eldest daughter, who's usually the one that's kind of a Debbie Downer, like, oh my gosh, there's a huge line, now we can't go, blah, blah, blah. And my son is usually like, well, can we go to a different one? I'm like, yeah, let me look up a different one. And we get there, and it's like an even better park, and there's no line. I'm like, see? So the universe wanted us to go there.
Got it.
So very you see how things can kind of work out if you just kind of surrender, but also go with the flow and not get too depressed on this. And she's like, oh, okay, yeah. And then we happened to meet like some friends there that just happened to be there. Like, oh, see, even better.
Yes. But it's kind of what you and I were talking about in the beginning, where we were kind of saying, like, it's weird to say, thank you for this happening to me, but thank you for this happening to me. And if you can teach your children that, like, this sucks, and this is making me angry, or this is making me sad. However, after you get rid of all of those feelings and you cry it out, however, what are we learning? What did we learn from this situation? What can we take away from this situation? And having that, teaching them to be able to spin it with your help, with your assistance, with your guidance, is what is creating, a better human.
Yeah. And to go back to your other question of the moms that are kind of fearful of how are their kids going to be raised by the other spouse, well, you can't control that part, but the part that you can control is how are you raising your children when they're with you, and what are the skills and tools and techniques and, just ability to process information that you are giving them, that it's the same person. So they're going to take all of that in whatever environment that they're going to be in, whether it's with the other parent or a work situation or a love situation. So that's really the part that you can control and you can kind of work on. And they are going to have those innate abilities regardless of where they are.
Exactly.
So, and that's going to really then change the energy with their relationship with the other parent too.
Yeah.
Because now the other parent's going to be like, oh, wow, they're asking questions about this. Oh, but they're not reacting to this, or they're responding differently. And that relationship will change.
Yep. Absolutely. That's amazing, for sure. I want you to talk a little bit about what you do. You kind of touched on it a little bit as far as private practice and wellness and stuff, but can you tell us what you do?
Sure. So I do have a wellness practice where I combine, energy healing with, neuroscience and positive intelligence techniques where, all it takes is about a couple minutes and you do it like throughout the day. And it really changes like your whole biorhythm and energy in your body. Because what I found as a busy person in general is that not, meditations, yoga, all of that stuff is great, but sometimes you don't have 45 minutes, you don't have an hour to really get into that state and then be able to bring it back into like your normal chaotic day.
Yeah.
So I found that if I just kind of break things apart and combined with different modalities that I've learned and had training in, and you combine that with your normal way of living. So what are things that you do in a normal day, like brushing your teeth, going to the bathroom, taking a shower? Mm-hmm. So you incorporate these techniques while you're doing things that you're already going to do anyway.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And you do that throughout the day, then that really changes and shifts like everything within you, your mind, body, and energy.
And where can we find you? Do you have a website or
yes,
Insta?
It's www.jothidugar.com. So it's JOTHI dugar.com. And I have a book that's called Chaos Loves You, so let's love it back. So that kind of gives you, it's kind of a starter, just to kind of open people's awareness and minds into, you don't have to spend hours and hours. You don't have to go see a specialist at first if you're kind of intimidated by it. So, the book kind of gives you things you can start doing on your own. And then when you feel comfortable, then you can kind of reach out to me, as a holistic wellness practitioner, or, whomever else really. But it's kind of like a starter book too. And it was meant for busy executives, actually, because
Oh, wow. Okay.
as an executive in federal service in cybersecurity, I'm like, well, the technology leaders out there and all just leaders in general, are not really prone to really putting themselves out there and getting therapy and healing right from the start.
Absolutely.
No matter what the modality. So I wrote a book that's it's very easy to understand, steps that anyone can take from a mind, body, and energy perspective. And then as they start taking those steps, they'll start noticing the changes, and then they can kind of follow through on next steps.
Absolutely. Very cool. That's awesome. And I have your website down here below. And then I'll also be, depending on where you're watching us, if you're watching us live now, hello. Thank you for being here with us. If you're watching us on the replay, Jyothi's stuff will be linked, either Facebook in the threads below. She'll link those in, or I'll be putting in the description on YouTube if you're watching us on YouTube. But listen, girl, I appreciate you spending so much time with us and breaking this all down. This was incredibly enlightening. I do want to end with a question, because obviously, the females that are going to be more than likely, watching this this breakdown are females who grew up in some sort of a family culture that's a little more strict. What do you think some advice would be for females out there who are just now coming to a realization that they're not down with this? They're not down with the culture that they're being raised in, and they're viewing their life a little bit differently, and they're thinking way outside the box than maybe their parents or their grandparents are. What would be your advice on like their first steps? Obviously they shouldn't just go total anarchy and just like run away from home. What do you think would be their first steps to kind of breaking out of that?
Yeah, I mean, really depends. Like, are you still living with your parents? Like, if you're a student, I probably wouldn't suggest just completely going scorched earth. But maybe ask, however that, I mean, if it's an abusive relationship, you got to be careful, right? You don't want to increase that, especially if you think you can get out of it within a few years or later. So it really depends on the situation. But if you're a single woman, but you still have a relationship with your parents, but you're not really living with them, then it is time to just come to acceptance that this is not a healthy relationship, and really also come to acceptance that you do want to start exploring other avenues, whether it's your religion or culture or food habits, even or belief systems or values. We're meant to come on this earth to experience different things. It's not just to conform to whatever we were born into. So just coming to acceptance is the first thing, and then start taking steps. Like, just explore. I'm doing that right now. You don't have to settle on one particular religion. You don't have to settle on one particular way of being. Try different things out. Explore. Because I've also noticed that when you start exploring other religions, they can also get very like, oh yeah, like you totally have to do this, and this is the only savior in the world. Like, okay, well, I understand your point of view, and it's up to you. Do you want to try that, or do you want to just kind of follow concepts and then also explore other things? So yeah. I would say the first thing is you have to come to acceptance that, okay, this has not been working for me, and I want to branch out. Okay, well, how do I branch out? Then start looking at the different things you want to branch out in. As long as you're not really, and also come to acceptance that you have been kind of codependent with your family or with your society or whomever you're codependent with, and try to slowly start. I wouldn't say just go. I mean, some people preach like just cut the chains and then that's it, and then you start your new life. That's one way of doing it. But then you also have to, if you kind of put this in war tactics, you might win the battle, but then are you really going to win the war at the end of this? Because you might need them at some point.
Yep.
As a woman, like if you have kids, let's say, you don't really want to just cut the ties like with your family, because maybe you might need them at some point. And I'm not saying just to like use them, but you really have to think like, what is the best long-term situation? Maybe short-term, you might have to put some boundaries, create standards for yourselves, and don't expect them to follow your standards or boundaries, but you have to follow your own standards and boundaries. So if they cross your standards or they go below your standards, what are you going to do about it? And kind of write that out for yourself. Like if they start calling you names or they come over and totally disrespect you, you can't be like, you didn't follow my standard. They're gonna be like, we don't give a crap. We are who we are. We're not going to change. Like, okay, then what are you going to do about it? Are you going to leave the house, even if they're in your house? Are you going to ask them to leave? Well, what if they don't leave? So it's kind of like facing your fears with facts and kind of having a parachute plan as well. If this happens, okay, what does that mean? And then what am I going to do about it? Because the only person that you can control is you. And start kind of thinking along those ways. Oh, this happens. This is what I'm going to do about it. Here's my standards. I'm not dipping below this. Here's my boundaries. And if you're dealing with toxic people or narcissistic people or just high conflict people that just like to create conflict, there's not a whole lot you can do to change how they are, because there's nothing wrong with them according to them. But you can change how you are, how you respond to them, and then also limit interactions. You don't have to cut it off fully. You can say, okay, you know what? You're only allowed to come every other week for like 2 hours. And then little by little, the relationship will start changing because you're changing yourself. So the energy can't be the same anymore.
Yep, exactly. Great. Well, I love that. This has been great. I appreciate you taking the time. I appreciate your insight. Do you have any closing thoughts before I close up?
Just, for everyone out there, just take pride in who you are. As you start becoming your authentic self, be authentic unapologetically. You don't have to explain anything to anyone. The only person that you have a need to explain anything to is to yourself and to, a higher source. And even that you don't have to explain, because the higher source knows what you're doing. So really just take pride in yourself, seek validation within yourself, love yourself, like self-love. And once you start doing all of these things, little by little, things will start changing. So have faith and hope.
Yeah. That's awesome. Well, listen, thank you for those of you that are watching here live. We appreciate you spending some time with us and listening in. Those of you that are watching on the replay, I do go back and answer any questions or any thoughts or anything. So feel free to comment just as you would if you were watching us live. But this has been absolutely fantastic. I want to thank Jothi for being here with us today. If you are interested in learning more about her website is linked right there below, www.jothidUgar.com. Thank you so much for joining us here on Her Version. If you have an amazing story to share of struggle to triumph, be sure to reach out to me here or at herversion.life. I am your host, Sabrina Victoria, and I'm so grateful to be here sharing a platform that allows people to share their truth and inspire others. Do something awesome today. Much love.